Hello! I'd like to talk about how Devastated Dreams is inspired and draws heavily on Filipino folklore. So I guess I'd like to talk a little bit about my interest in Filipino folklore. And while, I'm a boring white American and my family goes back in America for generations, and so I'm not very culturally interesting. Um, but my wife is from the Philippines, and I find that interesting. And we're bringing a child into this world, and I think it would be good if our child understood, his cultural background on the Filipino side, since not much to report on on my background. But I guess my personal interest in Filipino folklore specifically started. I went with my wife. I think we were dating then, and her good friends to like Sinister Point, this haunted house thing that they set up in Los Angeles. And for whatever reason, her good friends started telling me all about the Manananggal and the Aswang. And Aswang is sort of the blanket catch-all title for, I guess, ghouls or monsters. And the Manananggal I thought was particularly interesting because it's a female spirit that tears itself in half, and then the upper half flies around and it sucks babies out of the belly button of pregnant women in order to feed. And there's all sorts of different legends. Like if you're fighting a Manananggal, if you put salt on their severed legs, which just stand around while they fly around, it can kill them. Also, garlic and holy water repel them, and you can fight them with a whip made out of stingray tails. So if you're ever battling in a swang, those tidbits may come in handy, and certainly it's something I'd like to work into the game, but it's challenging because most people know nothing about a swang, so they don't know that those would be good tools to fight a swang. So anyway, but what I wanted to talk about specifically are the challenges of working with folklore, because there's so many stories and they're somewhat conflicting. So I'd like to talk about the tick-tick. Now, the tick-tick is something I'm interested in, and I have a vision in my mind of what a tick-tick is, based on what I've read. But the problem is I've read a bunch of conflicting things. So I think Wikipedia defines a tick-tick as basically synonymous with a swan. Then there's another movie called Tick-Tick, The Aswang Chronicles, where it's sort of like a comedy horror action film, and the Tick-Ticks in this movie are kind of like weird sort of zombie dogs that kind of reminded me of Resident Evil. I wasn't, super impressed with their design, since the monsters are CG, but that's another idea. And then I was talking to, or rather my wife, I got her to ask her parents what a tick-tick was. And so her dad said tick-tick aren't actually a swang. It's just a bird that indicates that there's a swang around there. And that's where the ticking noise comes from. And Mom said that the tick-tick is when an aswang takes the form of a bird, because aswangs are shapeshifters, and so they can form big dogs and things like that. And that's actually something people still believe. I was watching the Filipino news with my wife. Well, it's in Tagalog, so I wasn't really watching it, but I was super surprised to see, a headline on the TV that said, like, a swang attack, and then I got my wife to tell me the gist of it, and there were a number of people, and they showed these people with these terrible scars and injuries, and they're like, we're being terrorized by a swang in the form of a large dog. it's it turned out that, well, at least the government or the reporters seemed to think that it was just a large dog, and they gave them rabies shots, and they did not think it's an Aswang. But I mean, it's interesting because I think if you look at it, a lot of people in the Filipino community believe that Aswangs are real, and certainly, I don't know. I've never seen one. Stranger things have been known to happen. I mean, sometimes there's a nugget of truth in things. I mean, I'm not really sure people are shape-shifting into animals, but what do I know? Anyway, but I think it's interesting that this is a belief that people still have even in modern times, and it's a fear. And I hear stories from family members and about experiences where they heard the ticking noise, and I think it's really scary. I mean, especially when you think about it in the context of the more rural areas. If you're surrounded by wildlife and you hear a ticking noise, and you don't have your motion sensing security cameras and your door locks. I mean, some of these nipa huts, which are sort of like a traditional Filipino bamboo and grass hut that people actually live in, don't have door locks, and they have just open windows. I mean, I would be crapping my pants. I'm not sure how brave I'd be in that situation, but it's just like me. I am renting a place in some sort of complex, and we're surrounded by houses and construction site, so the scariest thing that happens to me is getting woken up at 6 in the morning when they start doing construction. And so it's interesting to imagine, being in a completely different environment, and I think that, informs your beliefs and how you perceive things. And so it's been interesting to sort of imagine myself in a different situation, a situation that's entirely alien to me, but is perfectly natural to the people living in the Philippines. And so that's a really interesting aspect of the game, and I think that is something that is unique. It's nice to see the world through other people's eyes, and I think that's something cool we can share, and something interesting sort of takeaway. I mean, obviously it's still going to be a horror game, and we're going to take some liberties with everything, right? It's not a documentary, but I think there will be some perspective gained, hopefully, from the the environment, the atmosphere, the world, which is drawing on actual locations in the Philippines. So anyway, that's my little intro to Filipino folklore, and talking about why it's interesting and the challenges of developing a game based on it, but hopefully the rewards. So thank you for watching.